You've seen the headlines. You've heard the passionate arguments. The debate over sports categories is absolutely everywhere, and it can get really personal. But what if we've been looking for answers in all the wrong places? What if the key isn't in today's news cycle, but in 18th century philosophy? Today, we're going to take a step back and look at this entire issue through the eyes of Immanuel Kant to see if we can find a clearer way to understand what makes a competition fair in the first place. So, let's just start with the most basic question possible. What's the point of all this? What actually makes a competition, well, meaningful? Is it really just about who crosses the finish line first, or is there something much, much deeper going on that keeps us all so invested? It might sound a little weird, but sports aren't actually designed to make everyone perfectly equal. I mean, think about it. If every single competitor were exactly the same, the winner would just be random, a total coin toss. And honestly, who wants to watch that? No, the real magic of sports is in what the source material calls controlled inequality, a system that's specifically built to let the real stuff, skill, strategy, and pure talent, be the things that decide the winner. And this right here, this just nails the point perfectly. The entire system of modern sport is about stripping away any unearned advantage. We ban doping, we standardize equipment, we create all these different categories, and we do it all for one simple reason, so that the differences we actually want to see, the ones that come from years of dedication and raw talent, are the only ones that matter on the field. Okay, so this whole idea of controlled inequality leads us right to our next big concept: the defined arena. The idea here is that for any fair contest to even be possible, every sport first has to build its own kind of artificial world, a world with its own very specific set of rules. And the cool thing is, once you start looking, you see these arenas absolutely everywhere. Boxing has its weight classes. Formula One has incredibly strict rules on engine design. We have age categories from junior leagues all the way up to masters tournaments. All of these rules on doping, on equipment, on who competes where, they're all just the walls that build the arena. I love this analogy from the source because it's so perfect. It's just obviously true, right? A car has 4 wheels. A motorcycle has 2. They are fundamentally different machines. So the rule isn't a judgment. It's not saying the F1 car is bad. It's just stating a fact. For a motorcycle race to be a meaningful race about motorcycling, well, you need motorcycles. So this is the really critical takeaway. These categories aren't designed to exclude people just for the sake of it. Not at all. They're designed to create the very possibility of a meaningful competition. Without these structures, the whole thing just collapses into a chaotic mess of mismatches that nobody would want to watch. All right, so we've established that we need an arena, and that arena needs rules. Simple enough. But here's the million-dollar question. How do we figure out what those rules should be? To answer that, we're going to take a pretty surprising turn, all the way back to an 18th century philosopher. Okay, here's where we get a little philosophical, but stick with me because this is really cool. There's this concept called a rule-governed practice, and it's a powerful idea. A game like chess or basketball literally does not exist without its rulebook. The rules don't just regulate the game, they create the game from nothing. And sports are probably the ultimate example of this. And this brings us right to our guide for this explainer, Immanuel Kant. For Kant, if you want any system to be rational and fair, its rules have to be universal, period. They have to apply to everyone in every relevant situation with no exceptions. A rule that only applies some of the time, that's not a rule. It's just arbitrary. So if we take this big philosophical idea from Kant and apply it directly to sports, what does that actually look like? What kind of test would he tell us to run on the rules that define our competitive arenas? This is really the heart of the whole argument. This is where we take Kant's most famous idea, you've probably heard of it, the categorical imperative, and apply it directly to the logic of how we structure sports. Kant basically gives us a 2-step checklist for figuring out if a rule is fair and logical. First, there's the universalization test. And second, there's the principle of treating persons as ends in themselves. So let's break down what those actually mean. Okay, test number 1, universalization. This is all about consistency. It says a rule is only a good rule if you could make it a universal law for every single person in the system, and the system wouldn't just break. It's basically a very sophisticated way of asking that simple question, well, what if everybody did that? If the answer is total chaos, the rule fails the test. And here's how that applies directly to sports.
If we create a rule for a category that's based on something subjective, something that can't be universally measured, what happens when we universalize it? Well, if anyone can just apply their own subjective criteria, the category loses all objective meaning and pretty much dissolves into thin air. From a Kantian point of view, that rule is illogical because it literally destroys the very structure it's supposed to be defining.
Kant's second big test is all about respect. It says you can never treat people merely as a tool to achieve some other goal. For sports, this means the rules have to serve the athletes and the integrity of the competition itself. If the rules are being designed to achieve some goal outside of the sport, to use the competition as a platform, then you risk treating the athletes as just pawns for that other agenda. This all leads to this fascinating paradox. Rules actually create freedom. Think about the rules of the road. They tell you where to drive and how fast, but in doing that, they create a system where everyone is free to travel safely. It's the exact same logic in sports. The rules of the game create a protected space where athletes are truly free to test their skills in a meaningful way. So let's bring this all together now. By using this Kantian framework, what we can do is reframe this entire, often heated debate. We can move it away from being about personal feelings and toward being a question of pure structural logic. This framework presents us with a really crucial distinction. On one side, you have the idea of defining sports categories by subjective identity. On the other side, you have the Kantian approach, defining categories purely by objective, performance-relevant traits that the sport was designed to measure in the first place. The key question from this perspective is, which of these two can actually form the basis of a truly universal rule? So, if we follow Kant's logic to its conclusion, it means that any rule defining a sports category has to meet these four conditions. It has to be objective and measurable. It's got to be applicable to everyone equally. It needs to be stable over time, and it can't be arbitrary. It needs a clear, rational basis that's tied directly to the nature of the sport itself. And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. This philosophical lens doesn't ask, who is this person? It asks, is this rule logical? Is it consistent? And can it be applied universally without destroying the very category it creates? It shifts the entire focus from the players to the rulebook. And so this whole philosophical journey leaves us with one final, powerful question. Regardless of where you personally stand on any of these debates, the framework asks us all to consider this. For any competition to be truly fair and truly meaningful, do its rules have to be universal first? That's the challenge this framework leaves us with. Thanks for joining me.